Well, welcome here live from Cairo. Salam alaikum. It's a real pleasure to be back in Egypt again. I was here in November 2024, so nice to be back a couple of months later, and my first time actually in Cairo. So a real joy to be here. This was a very impromptu live stream. We only advertised this on Saturday. I was conscious that I was here. Plus, we've got all of these new leadership insights that we wanted to share with you. So I thought, why not? Let's do it live from Cairo. So I am competing with some background noise. This is a live broadcast, an outside live broadcast. I think probably the first live outside broadcast we've done on the World Class Manager sort of live stream efforts. So again, a huge thank you to everyone who's tuned in. Do let us know on the chat, whichever chat function you've got access to on whatever platform. I think we're live on Facebook, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and also on StreamYard. So huge thank you to everyone who's dialed in. Let us know where you're from. Shout out your city. This is live, as I said, from Cairo. And we're going to begin in a few seconds where we're going to focus on 3 really important insights from our World Class Manager data. So as we said, often as the live streams progress, the intros get flashier and flashier. Now we've got the World Class Manager logo on a flag flapping in the sky. Look at that. So again, a huge thank you to everyone who's connected with us and dialed in. Let us know where you're from, represent your city or your company or your team. Let us know where you're dialing in from. And again, it's a huge thank you for you to be part of this live stream here with us. I was prompted to set this up because for those of you who don't know, my name is Wayne Clark. I run an organization called the World Class Manager Program, and we've now developed a ton of managers all around the world. Actually, we think probably more close to about 250,000 managers around the world who've been through our World Class Manager Program. If you don't know about what we're up to, we conducted our research all the way from New Zealand, all the way through to Vancouver, interviewing CEOs, HR directors, frontline managers, and frontline teams, asking a very, very simple but fundamental question of what is the role of a great manager. They told us, we listened, we heard that loud and clear around the world, and we built a program called the World Class Manager Program based on the insights that we've picked up from managers all around the world. So over 50 countries, it's now more than about 250,000 managers from companies, from governments. Oh, we've got someone in from Athens, Greece. Hello, welcome to you. And then it's made its way in book format into the book called How to Become a World Class Manager, which launched in 2023. And we've just had the honor of having our book republished in Arabic. So that came out in Saudi Arabia towards the back end of 2024. And we're on the promotion of that through the rest of 2025. So you may be listening to this from 2 very different perspectives. I wanted to share with you some of our research from some of the factors that we cover and some of the modules in our World Class Manager Program. And you might be listening to this from the perspective of this is valuable for you, or you might be listening to this from the perspective that this is valuable for your team or for your organization. Indeed, you may run a company, you may have an ambition one day to run a company, you may want to become more senior in your own organization. Whichever the plan, whatever the ambition, our focus is to try and help you on that journey. And as I said, we assist thousands and thousands of managers all around the world in our program. And what we like to do is run these live streams on a monthly basis to try and share with you both our insights and also the data. We're uncovering so much data on a regular basis. So we thought, well, the best way to get that out is to try and do this on a regular basis. So if this is the first time that you've connected into the live stream, massive welcome. And as we often say, let's get to it. So 3 things I wanted to cover for today, 3 elements or areas of what we call our World Class Manager Series 2 program. So we have Series 1, which focuses on what we call the essentials of great management, and Series 2, which are kind of more evolved topics. And actually, the more time you spend in your role as a manager, the more that you'll recognize that these are some quite significant issues, and we like to cover those, and they're covered in Series 2. It's kind of like Netflix, but even better. So we've got Series 1 of the program, Series 2, and also actually a 3rd series is about to come out. I know, anticipation is building, and we're going to zero in on some of the fundamentals that we need to build a world-class HR team, but that's coming down the line in 2025. For the purpose of today, I wanted to focus on 3 of the modules that feature in World Class Manager Series 2. One is looking at what we call influencing for success. The second one is about difficult conversations. And the third one is about what we call emotionally intelligent leadership. Now, these 3 are not there by chance. We didn't just pluck them out of the air. We're constantly polling, listening to managers, listening to CEOs, listening to leaders of companies and saying, what is it that you feel you need? What are some of the most essential sort of challenges and topics that are on front of mind for you as a leader for the managers in the organization. Also, we're asking the managers, and if you are connected to me on LinkedIn, if you're watching this over LinkedIn, then you'll know that we're probably polling 2-3 times a week asking questions. The majority of the time, those are related to developing great managers, and sometimes we just throw in some random silly thing because life's too short. We've got to have some fun. And I thought I'd run a rival stream. That there is the president's inauguration in the US. And if you want an alternative to that, welcome to the World Class Manager live stream. So 3 things that I wanted to cover off as part of today, and let's get into it with the first one, looked around what we call influencing for success. Now, when we talk about being an influencer, this is not about, of course, trying to be some sort of Paris Hilton influencer inside your organization, taking cool pictures. This is about influencing for success, and success is whatever success means for your organization. That could be revenue growth, that could be customer service development, that could be customer service delivery improvement, that could be efficiency gain, that could be cost reduction, could be productivity gain, whatever success means for your organization. You could be in the public sector where societal impact is the main outcome. You could be a housing, public or social housing organization where positively impacting the lives of residents is an important outcome. So whatever the success word means for your organization, we're thinking about our role as managers, our role as leaders, in how do we influence our organizations and how do we influence other key leaders inside the organization. On each one of these 3 areas, I wanted to share with you, and I said this in the lead up to today, what we call some world exclusive stats. And this isn't like clickbait hype. These are truly world exclusive stats for us to share. We've never, ever shared these stats. Even in the book that came out, these weren't in the book. So again, we're delighted to try and bring this to you for the first time ever, like live from Cairo. You can't really see much of the Cairo background because I guess the screen is funny because it's so bright here, but it's a lovely warm Cairo. So the first area that we're talking about is influencing for success. And this number, 53%, what does this represent? Well, this represents the percentage of managers who regard themselves as an active driver in driving change and influencing in the organization. This, for me, was honestly quite a mind-blowing revelation when we looked at our data. Because if you think about it, if you're a CEO of a company or if you lead a large team of managers, we often relate to the population of managers in the organization as managers. We think they play a proactive role in forwarding the organization's goals, vision, mission, purpose, whatever it is that we're focused on as a company. And we've recognized in our data, and this is represented by thousands of managers who've contributed to this data, that about half of the population of managers regard themselves, self-identify as being proactive drivers, proactively influencing the rest of the organization. This is interesting because I think often we believe that we've got all of the managers in place and therefore all of the managers are going to play this proactive role. It seems to be, based on what we've uncovered in the data, about half of those managers probably are. Do we want to try and change the other half of those managers to become more influential? Maybe that might be an ambition of the organization. Or could we recognize that half of the managers probably do feel like that? And if that is the case, who are they? How do we identify them? And how might we best support them in being much more influential, given that they see this as an important element or a behavioral trait in a way that they believe that they have? So I think this is really quite fascinating. And again, as we come across some of these topics and some of the data, I'd love it if you've got any questions or any thoughts, please do feel free to jump in. Rose from our team is live on the line with us and she'll pick up some of these questions and hopefully we can get to them if we've got a bit of time towards the end. So first thing we're looking at is how do we play a proactive role in driving and influencing change? And there are 3 how-tos that we like to include as part of each one of these 3 areas. So let's jump into the first how-to on this one of influencing for success. The first thing is about how well do you know your stakeholders? And I'm talking to you directly. Obviously, for many of you and me, we've never met before, but just thinking about this in the round for you, your team, for your organization. How well do we as managers understand what our stakeholders really want? I think this is important because it leads to one of the other points we're going to cover in the last area around emotionally intelligent leadership. This is about our degree to which we can empathize with what people need and want. And all stakeholders have got needs. Every key stakeholder, whether more junior, whether more senior, whether inside the organization or outside the organization, often has a requirement for something. And how well do we understand what our stakeholders want? Often as managers, we've got a myriad of other senior stakeholders. Those could be internal, those could also be external. And often we don't have time. Time is often the big problem. Module 4 of our World Class Manager program is called Optimizing Your Time. And it's probably one of the most, valued parts of the program because we're focusing on how do you get some of your time and some of your life back, which is key. But time is often in a way, an impediment we often feel, or a barrier to understanding or better understanding stakeholders. So point one, definitely know the stakeholders. Number two, how do we adapt our style? We always have to adapt our style to whatever situation we're in. I'm here in this wonderful country in Egypt. And often, where we go country by country, city by city, organization by organization, every culture is different. I live in London. The culture between the south of England to the north of England is different. We always have to flex and adapt our style. And again, to what degree can we do that? Which comes from, of course, recognizing that we might need to do that in the first place. So first thing is, how do we make sure that we understand our stakeholders, adapt our style, which is key. And then the third area is thinking about how do we achieve a win for every single person here? How do we achieve what we call the win for the organization, the win for the stakeholder, and the win for you as a manager as well? The key to identifying what the win might be is the first point, which is understanding what the stakeholder needs. Often when we feel like we've got a good handle on what this individual or this team or the organization needs, we can start to play a much more influential role. And I often think that this is quite misunderstood. So the 53% of managers who do believe that they play a proactive, or they identify as an active driver of influence and change, I suspect there's many more people that could say that if they took some of these steps, if they understood what the stakeholder wanted, if they knew the preferences, if they could really think through what a win-win-win looks like. I think we'd have a higher percentage of managers who probably feel like that. And it's kind of okay if you're not also, because not every manager will be like that too. So first thing that we're looking at is what we call influencing for success, big area. And I think there's a huge amount that we can proactively do because we're not born with it. We can definitely learn. Second big area is looking at what we call difficult conversations. Now, this is a big area for us. Throughout the entire development of our World Class Manager program, which we originally launched in 2016, and we've constantly been collecting feedback. We ran a review and a report called What Do Managers Need Now? At the beginning of lockdown in 2020, or What Managers Need Now, we called the report. And difficult conversations was an area which came up time and time again. I suspect it's always been a problem. I suspect it will always probably be a problem. But understanding how to have a difficult conversation practically is really valuable for people. And it's why we included this as part of the program. Just as an observation, of all of the organizations we've come across, we get to spend time in some exceptional cultures where it tends to be the exceptional cultures of organizations we find tend not to have very many difficult conversations. Organizations that don't prioritize what we call really effective goal-setting conversations, performance management, and appraisal conversations tend to often have much more of a problem when it comes to difficult conversations, i.e. they have many more difficult conversations. And I'll give you an example. One of the companies we work with is a hotelier. Every 12 weeks, every single line manager sits with their team, sounds simple, and asks them a series of very simple questions to get those individuals to come forward and share with them what's going on for them. You think like many places in the world, of course, there's a cost of living crisis here in Egypt. There's a cost of living crisis pretty much everywhere around the world right now. And especially if you're in a lower paid job, you're going to have some significant challenges economically and other stuff going on for you at home. What they do is every 12 weeks, they sit with their team and they ask them, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Very open-ended questions that give people a chance to get stuff off of their chest. It tends to be in this particular organization, I don't want to embarrass them, they've got a few thousand people in 7 countries across 20 different locations. They tend not to have many employee grievances. They don't have courtroom cases. They don't have employee relationship issues. We've got a comparable organization, and I definitely won't say who they are, but they're around the same size of an organization, and they've got an entire team of people devoted to managing difficult conversations, to handling court cases, employee grievance problems. I mean, a real mess of stuff going on in the organization. If you then sort of peeled back the layers and were a fly on the wall and looked into all of these one-to-one conversations they don't have them, which is the start point. And often what happens is if you're my line manager and I've got some issues, we've got some stuff going on and we never talk about it, what happens is often those issues fester, they bubble up and they become big issues. Now, it might be that you do something that's seemingly quite insignificant, but it prompts a massive reaction because we've not got to understand the individual. So when it comes to these difficult conversations, I think there is a massive hack. There's a shortcut, which is good, regular, in-depth, personable, human conversations over time tend to eradicate the need, in most cases, to have difficult conversations. Now, of course, this isn't a perfect science. People often said if management was a science, we'd have an equation for it by now, but we don't, because it's an art form and people do very, very irrational things. Human beings, who would be a manager? What an insane thing to do. Who would be a manager? We're irrationally and emotionally charged individuals, and therefore sometimes difficult conversations are fundamentally inevitable. But I'll get back to the script here. Well, there is no script. I've got no notes. This is life. So 35% of managers, interestingly, say that the number one thing that they don't like to talk with their teams about are behavioral issues. So it could be and we've got a number of things, maybe we can cover this in another stream. We've got like 3 or 4 things that we question managers on. One of them, for example, is about performance management. One of them is around promotional issues. And then one is around what we call behavioral issues. This is the single biggest issue. 35% of managers do not like having conversations with individuals about behavioral issues. I don't know if you've come across this, whether you've tried to challenge someone on something behavioral in your team. Not easy. We also come across a lot of, I'll save that thought for a minute. Let's get through the detail first. So a couple of things here. One is what we would call listen actively. And when I say this, when we talk about listening actively or active listening, let's paraphrase, let's summarize, and let's double check to make sure that we've really understood what it is that they're actually saying. I don't know about you, and often, we get to record what we do a lot because it's part and parcel of what we do. And often I'll listen back to a recording, I'll listen back to a conversation we've had with someone over a live stream. And I'm like, I heard something totally different live than I heard when I listened to the recording back again in terms of what they said. And often what happens in the moment is you're so full of your own bias and thoughts and narrative that it really clouds what we're hearing. So often what we call active listening is truly being in the moment, genuinely listening to what the individual's got to say, and we can check to make sure that we've understood it by paraphrasing, by summarizing. I know this might sound like teaching us to suck eggs, because it's unbelievably basic stuff, this, but it's so unbelievably basic, so easy to do, that it's also really easy. As the great Jim Rohn says, if it's easy to do, it's also really easy not to do. Second thing is about how do we make it safe? How do we create a safe space, a safe environment where people feel genuinely free enough to share whatever's going on for them when it comes to a difficult conversation? Of course, what we often do is because we have a biased view of how someone should behave, often we can then think about, it might be, again, important to try and understand it from their perspective and genuinely understand where they're coming from. Impossible to do in a way if they don't feel safe enough to be able to share how they're feeling and what's going on for them. And then the third area here, of course, is prepare well. I think the last thing we probably want to do in a difficult conversation is a snap reaction to just getting involved and steaming into something. Bad idea. We want to plan, we want to prepare, and we want to make sure that we're armed either with the right level of evidence or that we have taken the steps to try and understand where they may be coming from. The reason why we say this is because when we go back to this first topic here around this is the problem that people don't like, managers do not like engaging with people on behavioral issues, is because it's really difficult to get someone to change their behavior. And we come across it all the time. I'm not trying to dismiss anything that our clients say, but we will meet a leadership team member and we'll probably meet another one within the next few weeks because it happens regularly. We'll say that we want to talk to our people about our new behavioral framework. We've got some new organizational behaviors, Wayne, that we want to talk with everyone about and get them to live and breathe these behaviors. And part of me thinks, well, good luck. Trying to get a fully grown adult to change the way that they do things and change the way that they behave is fundamentally difficult, if not impossible in many cases to do. Our behavior is so ingrained. Think about, we're on the 20th of January now. How many people by this point in January began dry January, or certainly for those of us in Europe, or other places around the world, began dry January with an ambition and didn't keep it? How many began to say, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to get fit, I'm not going to eat any carbs? How many have maintained that to January the 20th? A very small percentage. Getting people to change their own individual personal behaviors is tough enough, let alone some of the things that happen at work. Also, what might be driving people's behavior? Again, as a great manager, we should probably have a good insight to understand what sits behind it. Or even if we can't ask those individuals directly, it might be someone else in the team or someone that knows them, where we can start to get a better understanding of genuine empathy and caring, of understanding what might be going on for them and then what we can do. But the key, of course, is how we prepare really well for these conversations. And then the third area, and I'm hoping some questions are going to come in soon, because then we can cover some questions off before the end of the stream. The third area that we'll look at is what we call emotionally intelligent leadership. Sounds cool, lots of big words. It's really about empathy, even simpler than that. It's just about understanding where someone's coming from, walking in their shoes, understanding it from their perspective, seeing it from their point of view. I mean, it sounds unbelievably simple, but some people, it's unbelievably complex. Or it could be that they've never really given it some considered thought. Quick story. I met a guy once who I was asked to have a conversation with him because, how do I make this really anonymous? His boss, right, said that, got some challenges with this individual and doesn't feel like they're very good on the old emotional intelligence scale. Let's put it that way. So I met with this individual and then I said, look, when your team come in on a Monday morning, it would be a really good idea to ask them how their weekend was. And he actually said to me, oh, wait, that's a really good point. And he went to write it down. As he's writing it down, I'm thinking to myself, this isn't a good point. What are you writing this down for? And it was a revelation. He'd never considered that having that conversation on a Monday morning would be a smart thing to do with the team. For other people, we think actually this is part and parcel and just normal of being a great manager. Obvious. For some people, this is a true revelation. So when we look at 46%, and again, this for me, not trying to dramatize this, but this is big drama. When we look at these stats, this one really blew me away because we found out that 46% of managers have a problem, have a challenge with self-regulation of their own sort of behavior. When they feel levels of frustration, they find it hard to not show that and not act in accordance with that. Not because we found this magic 46% of managers who've got behavioral problems. This is a general distribution population issue, I would argue, based on the thousands of managers across different organizations in different countries that we've picked up this data from in our program. So if we know that about half the managers have got a challenge with impulse, with thinking about what might trigger them at work, and that's not just at work, probably that's all throughout life because that's how life works, then I recognize that, and we recognize that this is a significant challenge for pretty much every single manager out there. So when it comes to being an emotionally intelligent leader or emotionally intelligent leadership, we should probably also recognize that if this is true for managers, it's probably true for everybody else, which suggests that about half of other people might be triggered in similar ways. And how might we think about that? The key to this, because we can only control what we can control, of course, is how do we build self-awareness? And it might sound like, well, how do you do that? How do you build self-awareness? One of the things to do, if you're fortunate enough to work in a company where you conduct a regular 360 process, that can help because you can get other people's perspectives on you. The challenge with 360s is often the 360 game can be gamed. So I worked in an organization once where I had to select 10 people to give me a review of how they felt about me. And they would choose 5 at random. As long as I picked 10 friends, I get a great review. Right, so 360s can be biased, but I would invite you to choose people who are going to be honest about that. So that can be a way to do it. And also, again, really sort of reflecting back on conversations, meetings you've had, how it went, how you dissect some of that, what might trigger you. So when you've come into interaction with either a leader, a manager, a stakeholder, a member of the team, a customer, where it's really jammed or thrown your emotions, what was it that happened? Why did that happen? And if you could trace that back, again, I'm no psychologist. My wife is actually a psychologist, so I've got to be careful what I say. She'll analyze me. But when we really think about what drives that, what might that be, and why, and again, how might we identify to help build a level of self-awareness? Second thing, of course, as we mentioned in the point before, is respond, don't react. When it comes to thinking through something where you may be emotionally triggered, how could you plan, prepare, and go back with a much better thought through approach to try and deal with that? And then the third area is what we call practice empathy. Sounds a bit strange. And when we were sort of coming up with the terminology for this, we thought, what can I proactively do? Everything, as I hope you've seen already, as our approach and how we focus on this, is hyper practical. We only like to focus on things that we can do to make a real impact. And I believe that you can definitely practice empathy. Part of the challenge is being aware and actually thinking through how empathic am I being in this situation? And again, self-reflection, you could build in, super simple, you could build in a weekly review process. Maybe on a Friday afternoon, you spend 15, 20 minutes. This is not difficult to do. And thinking back through all of the key interactions through the week, how might you have done a bit better? How could you have achieved a better outcome? If things didn't go your way in a particular meeting or a discussion or on a project or in a negotiation, what might be the case there and how can you build better levels of self-awareness? And then a final thing I would argue on when it comes to thinking about emotionally intelligent leadership is how best can you understand someone's backstory? I won't say who he is because it's not fair, but I met this most amazing business leader here in Cairo this morning, part of the reason why I'm here. and genuinely blown away. I mean, I asked him if he could share with me his life story from the beginning to obviously where we are now. And it was just remarkable, some of the things that he's done. Obviously, I've read about him online. We've had a very brief interaction, but getting a full life story, and it doesn't take long. I'm talking like 15, 20 minutes to really understand someone's journey. It just put the whole thing in perspective. It made me appreciate his success more than I even did. It made me recognize some of the hurdles and challenges he's probably overcome. And it helped me to really understand the mindset of the individual. And therefore, emotionally, I think I'm much more intelligent about how to engage with this individual based on an empathic view of understanding his world and how he might see the world in his frame of reference. So those are the three things. I do think these are quite a big revelation. I think on the first point around influencing, to recognize that, only half of the management population recognize that actually they are seeing themselves as drivers of change and influence in an organization. So revelation live here from Cairo for me, because this is a big number and we had no understanding until we'd looked at this data that this was the case. Difficult conversations. Remember, this behavioral issues are something that most managers, 35% of us, don't really like to engage with. And then the last one here on emotionally intelligent leadership, 46% of managers feel like their emotions are triggered through various mechanisms and means at work. In the run up to this, and it was very short because we only launched this on Saturday, the advertising for the live stream, I said that we would give, and I hid a statistic that we shared on LinkedIn, and we would give someone who got the right statistic on this particular issue. Actually, the statistic that I shared online was 46.6%. And a guy called Andrew Wilson, who was he just left the BBC, he was head of leadership and executive development at the BBC, and we had a real joy of working with Andrew over the years. Amazing man, check him out on LinkedIn. He guessed, and I thought, how could he have known? He guessed that the score was actually, the percentage was 45%. This is remarkable. Andrew, if you are tuned in, you do win this signed copy of the book. The big problem here is, I think Andrew probably already has a signed copy of our book. So we're not going to send Andrew a live copy of the book. For the first person who asks a question, we're going to give you a signed copy of the book, as long as it's not Andrew Wilson, of course. So anyway, over to you. I think we've got a few moments for some questions. We'd like to keep this nice and short and sweet because everyone's busy. But we do have a question coming in. Thank you very much. And I get to read this the same time that you see it too. Question from Jessica Saunders. Thank you very much, Jessica. If you want to drive and influence upper levels of management, but they're not good at... if you want to drive and influence upper levels of management, but they are not good at listening. Interesting conundrum here, Jessica. It's very interesting. So one thing I would argue, if you have a close enough relationship with upper levels of management where you might be able to try and single them out and get some one-to-one time with them, I would say this would be a smart thing to do. We've had the opportunity now in our work to work with thousands or more than 1,000 CEOs and thousands of different leaders. I'm yet to come across an individual who I've not been able to have a half an hour coffee with or a lunch with, where at the end of that discussion, we've not got a new level of connection. So my plea would be, if you could identify the top 5, top 10 people in your organization, could you ask them for some personal one-to-one time? And I would argue, not in a meeting, try and get a coffee or something a little bit more informal and use that time to try and build a bridge and a relationship with the individual so that you've got a deeper connection with the individual. Often, it's, with someone you like, you're prepared to act on things that they ask you to do. And ultimately, what we're asking leaders to do is often act in accordance with what we think they should be doing. Why wouldn't they listen to us? What could we do to build our influence so that they would listen to us in the right way? My argument would be, in most cases, the quality of the relationship is usually the key. As managers, this puts us back in control because it means that we can proactively build a relationship with these individuals and therefore hope to be listened to in a different way. The truth is, Jessica, also with some people, they might not be that nice, right? There are some not nice people that we come across in the world. Luckily, they're in the small number, but there are some people it is genuinely difficult. But for the most part, I think there is something we can do to build a bridge and deepen the quality of the relationship. And Jessica, we're going to send you a signed copy of the book. Thank you very much. Second question from a wonderful man, Paul Schmilovich here. Awesome guy. Paul has said, a very close guy, spent loads of time with Paul. He was at HSBC, he's now at one of the brilliant banks, Bank of London in the Middle East, Nomo. Awesome guy, Paul. Check him out on LinkedIn too. So Paul has said, my view on stakeholders is that one key is that you need to build trust and relationship. Exactly. This takes time and energy. There is no shortcut and you can't cheat. Thoughts? I agree, Paul. I agree 100%. Absolutely agree. I don't think there's a shortcut to it. I definitely believe it takes time. And one of the keys is that often you try and need to create moments where you can sort of offshoot conversations where you start to build more trust, where you start to build more of an understanding of an individual, often happen quite sporadically, and they can probably only happen when you get together face to face. It is possible, of course, digitally, and I know we live in that world, but if you can get FaceTime, of course, that's really important. But nothing really to add to that, Paul. Absolutely brilliant point. So, again, and I've got another question here from Christy Greenbank. Thank you very much, Christy. How do you best recommend engaging senior leadership in these seemingly obvious steps? They are obvious steps, aren't they, Kirsty? Sorry, Christy. They are very obvious steps. One of the things this guy, Jim Rohn, talks about, the late, great Jim Rohn, if you've not seen any of his stuff on YouTube, American sort of inspirational speaker, leader guy, one of the things he said is that in order to improve your good health, it would be a great idea to take a walk around the block every day. And taking a walk around the block is really easy to do. But the problem is things that are really easy to do are also really easy not to do. That's one thing. The second thing is when we began this journey with World Class Manager, well, more than around 10 years ago, one of the first initial research pieces we conducted was with a company we were working with in Australia. We'd been there to train managers face to face in the old style way of doing it. We came back and they asked us to come back again. At the time, my oldest daughter was quite young and I faced the prospect, Christy, of saying to my wife, I need to go away for 3 weeks again to Australia. I didn't have the guts. She's a psychologist, Christy. So I said, so I asked the company, could we do this live online? And they said, yeah, it was early WebEx technology and we did it online. And one of the things that happened is we had 50 managers that we were asked to be on the session. And then as the people are coming into the session, there's around 80 people. And I'm thinking, who are these other 30 people that weren't invited to this session? And I started looking at the names of them. Christy, it was the senior managers. We had senior managers dialing into basic management training skills on things like appraisal conversations, time management, meeting skills, improving communication, managing stakeholder relationships, what you would consider to be Management 101. Actually, our ready product was called Management 101. And we had senior managers dialing into these calls. Why? Because they didn't have the training themselves, but it doesn't help you very much as a senior manager and your brand and your image to say, hey, I don't understand these basics. No one's ever showed me. Most senior managers, senior leaders, CEOs, C-suite directors of companies have never had formal basic Management 101 skills training, and therefore often don't have or lack some of the skill sets that you think should be there for senior leaders. And I think it's a massive misconception to believe that these people, because they're senior, because they have a higher grade, because they get paid more, because they have more responsibility, actually are better at doing this than your minimum wage guy who's maybe got like not much experience, but just gets it and understands it. And maybe it takes some time to understand it too. So I think basic management leadership skills training can be really valuable as a way to shortcut that. And of course, I'm going to promote our World Class Manager program. But I do think there's another way. If your budgets are super, super tight and you can't afford to do anything and invest money, I would do this. I would identify, because I think in every organization, you've got a proportion of people who are just exceptional, right? Let's imagine for a moment, it's Christy. Christy Greenbank has been recognized as the best person in the organization because everyone agrees that the way that Christy manages the team is better than anybody else. So why don't we do this? Why don't we observe Christy for a week in the life of? Why don't we see how Christy runs meetings, how Christy has one-to-one conversations, how Christy translates strategy into something that's relevant for the team, and on and on and on. There is no magic at play with any one of the best managers that you can think of in the organization. Why don't we observe what they do, document it, understand it, and build an approach for your organization, for your culture, based on that best practice? It's the fundamental basics of how we built our World Class Manager program, and we do this in organizations. Nothing rocket science in all of this. It's observing best practice, we structure it, build a program around it, and help other people move towards being Christy. The vision of Christy, Christy 2.0. This is the new vision for the company, Christy. Thank you so, so much. So I think we're going to leave it there because time, and we like to try and keep this nice and succinct. Any other questions? I think we've got a few, but we're going to handle those online after. Again, a huge, huge thank you for everyone dialing into this live stream. It was an impromptu one, as I said. First time that we've run anything like this outside broadcast. And luckily so far, given all the roadworks behind and all the traffic, hopefully you can hear me pretty well, but I think it's come across okay. Team have said that there are no more issues, so I think we're pretty good. We run these live monthly, and then what we're also doing now is every quarter, we have a global partnership with ACCA, So we're going to be running these with a thought leader and a CEO, interviewing them about their career journey. So you might like to tune into those every quarter as well. Again, a huge thank you for everyone who's dialed in. A huge thank you to Jessica, our winner of the signed book, and a massive thank you to also my team who are live on the line and helping to make the whole thing work. Blessings. Thank you so much here live from Cairo, and we look forward to seeing you